Hey everybody, welcome back to Tech Doc Education. Dr. Heldman here. In this movie, what we're doing, this is the fifth in a series of movies in which we're building out a pfSense virtualized environment. We're using pfSense open source software for our router, IDS, IPS. We've already built out one subnet that consists of a server and a Windows machine and Kali Linux. In this movie, what we're going to do is build out the second subnet, which consists of Ubuntu LAMP. LAMP stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, and what it does is it allows us to host a web server. We're going to put this LAMP server on the DMZ in our little environment here. So let's get started. This should be a lot of fun. Right, so here we are. I'm out at the Ubuntu screen. This is ubuntu.com, and I want you to note here that the company that manufactures Ubuntu software is called Canonical. They're based out of Europe. I think they have offices all over Europe and, of course, some here in the United States. Anyway, you go out to ubuntu.com, and instead of downloading the workstation version now, we're going to download the server version. Now, server is available for quite a few different platforms: Mac and Windows, ARM, IBM Power. There's even one for the S390X. You can get Ubuntu for IoT, and there's also the new thing, the Ubuntu Cloud. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to get Ubuntu Server, and then you have some choices here on how you download it. Now, I messed around a little bit with the idea of using multipass, and it's okay. What multipass is software that lives on your Windows computer or Mac or whatever, Linux, and it allows you to very quickly get a brand new version of Linux, of Ubuntu, to mess around with. Supposedly it interfaces with Oracle VirtualBox. My opinion is that it's got a ways to go. It's a little bit of a hassle to get it to work with it, and it doesn't play necessarily with other VirtualBox environments that you already have going. So I'm not a big fan of multipass right now. Maybe they'll go and they'll get it working better later, but for now what I'm going to do is go with the manual server download, and then you click the button to download it, and then you have to put it in a file and save it into a folder. I already have that, so I'm not worried about that, but I did want to show you how you get that. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to go out to Oracle VirtualBox here. Let me grab it. And we're going to create a brand new machine here. So I'm going to click the New button here, and I'm going to call this Ubuntu Server. And this is 20.04. And it is named Jammy. You could put Jammy in here if you wanted to. Ubuntu has this weird habit of naming their distros with different names, and so in this case it's Jammy Jelly, I think is what it's called. I'm going to put this in VirtualBox VM Ubuntu Server, select this folder, and I'm also going to select the ISO image. So I go to Other, and I go out to Software. I'm going to go to Linux Ubuntu Server and grab it. Here it is, 22.04. And I said 20.04, didn't I? It's 22.04. And I'm going to skip unattended installation. Now you'll notice in here, filled in Linux Ubuntu 64. That's great. I'm going to skip unattended. What unattended is you create an XML document, and what it does is it answers the installation questions for you, so you don't have to sit here and go through the wizard. It'll just answer those questions. I'm just going to avoid that. I'm just going to go through and install the ISO natively. I'm going to give this thing a little bit of RAM because we're running a server, so I'm going to give it 4 gig, and I'm going to give it 3 CPUs here. Click Next. I'm also going to give it a 50 gig hard drive. It doesn't need all that, but I always like to err on the side of more versus less. And then this is the summary screen. I'll click Finish. Now we're not done. We have created or told VirtualBox where the ISO's at. Now we have to give it some settings. So we click the Settings button. I go here to advanced, and I'm going to enable bidirectional. This is so handy because if you're out on, you're looking up a problem and there's a command or a file that you need, you can drag and drop it or copy it to the clipboard and paste it in. So that's very handy. You could also give it a description if you wanted to. Well, this is Ubuntu Server 22.04 for such and such experimentation or whatever. I don't typically do that, nor do I encrypt the disk. We go to System, we uncheck floppy, move hard disk up in the boot order, optical up in the boot order, and floppy down in the boot order. Go to display. Display is fine. We don't need to worry about anything here. By the way, under processor, you may or may not see these checkboxes enabled. I typically go with the default, so I'm not going to worry about that. Storage looks good. Audio, I'm going to uncheck because I'm not going to use this with server. Now, network is important. What we're going to do is we're going to put this in the DMZ network. So this is IntNet 2, not straight plain old IntNet now. Now we're putting it in a different environment. And then USB 2.0. Click OK. Now we're going to start the installation procedure. This installation is going to be a little bit different than what you might see if you were installing just native Linux, native Ubuntu. So I'm going to click Try or Install Ubuntu Server. And we get some very Linux-looking type stuff here. Not a problem. If you see an error, maybe you want to check it out, but typically the OKs are fine. Everything's good. This is OpenBSD. BSD stands for Berkeley Systems Division. It's an older version of Linux, of Unix server, and it's free. You can download BSD natively and try it out if you'd like in a virtual environment. And so now what we're doing is we're doing what's called Cloud Init. So it's going to talk to the Ubuntu Cloud server. Now, the Ubuntu Cloud Connect thing is good. There's not a problem with that. And they keep revolutionizing this stuff so that, they want everything to be centralized and available to you. And so it might take a minute for you to connect to the Ubuntu Cloud. But here we are. This is basically a script-based system. This is not a GUI, so it's not clickable. You have to hit the Enter key. So I'm going to hit Enter to select English. And I'm going to go ahead right now. I'm not going to update right now. I'm going to continue without updating. If you update to the new installer, it's going to take a little bit extra time. So I'm going to go without updating right now. You can see that it has English US as my system, which is fine. If yours was a different language, that's fine as well. You have a ton of them to pick from. I'm going to click Done. I'm going to install a regular Ubuntu server, not the minimized version. And the reason for that is that it says if you're not expected to log in, the minimized version might be the selection you want to make. But we are going to log in, and I don't really need third-party drivers, so I'm going to click hit Enter for Done. Now, this is an area where you want to really pay attention. It can pick up a DHCP address, and you see that it did. It picked it up off of the DMZ. But I don't think servers should have a DHCP address. So what we're going to do is we're going to massage this a little bit. So I'm going to tab up to where it says Ethernet and hit Enter. And I'm going to edit IPv4. So I'm just using my up and down arrows. And instead of DHCP, I'm going to hit Enter and select Manual. Now, the subnet here, it gives you some interesting stuff. So the subnet we want to be involved with is 172.16.1.0/24. Took me a while to figure this out. They don't give you a lot of help in understanding what to put in here, but what you're putting in is the entire subnet range, and then a /24 CIDR. The address that we want to give it is 172.16.1.10. The gateway is 172.16.1.1. There are a bunch of name servers that I want to put in here. My particular name server is 10.0.0.1, comma. I'm going to give it Google's DNS servers. So it's 8.8.8.8 and 8.8.4.4. I'm also going to give it Cloudflare servers. So 1.1.1.1, comma 1.0.0.1. And what it's going to do is put these in a big list, and I'll show that to you in a minute. And I don't have any search domains, so I'm going to hit save. So now it says that I've got a static address, which is great. That create bond, what that does is if you had 6 or 8 or 10 Ethernet adapters in your server, you could bond them all together so that any one Ethernet adapter would answer to that particular IP address. And it's a way of allowing for more data to get into the machine more quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Tab and select Done. I don't have a proxy, so I'm going to hit Done. And then this mirror. Now you can see here, it defaults to the European, so this US is missing. So it's going to default to archive.ubuntu.com/Ubuntu. But if you're in the United States, you can put in US dot to force it to go to the US Ubuntu mirror, which I don't know if it's going to be that much faster, but it may be a little bit faster. This is a confusing little area here. Use entire disk. This may lead you to think, if you're a newbie to VirtualBox, that it's going to erase your entire hard drive. That is not what's happening. What it's going to do is erase that little 50 gig of space that we gave it, which is fine by me. So I'm going to come down here and select Done. And then this is the file system summary. Now the one thing to pay attention to here is you see where it says ext4 at the top. You know, Windows has NTFS, Apple computers have Apple FS file system. This is the file system for Linux. There used to be an ext3, now it's ext4. You just need to know that this is the name of the file system that Ubuntu is using. It's quite common. Hit enter. And yes, I want to continue. Now it defaults to no. So what would happen is if you hit enter here, it would go right back around. What we want to do is we want to tell it, yes, we want to proceed, so we click continue. Now you have to fill in your credentials. So I'm going to put in Dr. Heldman. I'm going to put my server's name. What I would not do is I would not put in something like Corp Web Server or My Web Server or something like that. It's fine when we're doing this on an experimental basis, but if we were doing this in a real-life production environment, we wouldn't name something that's pretty obvious to a hacker. Oh, that's a web server. It's got to be. They have an easy enough time finding that out as it is anyway. So I'm going to just call this my web server, like that. And I'm going to pick a username. I'm going to do bheldman, and I'm going to type in a password. Remember that if you do type in a bigger name, like if you type in my web server and you spell it out and you want to put a space between the words, use the underscore key for that, not a dash. Okay, I'm going to hit done. I do not want to enable Ubuntu Pro. If this were a production server, I likely would do that. Hit enter. I am going to install OpenSSH. What this does for me is that it allows me to remotely get into this server via an SSH process like a PuTTY or something like that. So this is helpful, and I don't need an SSH identity right now. I don't have any SSH keys. Secure Shell port 22 uses public and private keys for its work. We don't have any. It'll generate the keys for us. So I'm going to come down here and hit done. And then it allows me to add some more server environments here. Now, there isn't anything here that super appeals to me. There's some things that you should be paying attention to, like Kubernetes is a way of sort of corralling a bunch of Docker containers together. It's very highly thought of. You've got Docker sitting out there. You've got Canonical Live Patch sitting out there. Some other stuff. Some of the stuff I don't know about. PowerShell is kind of interesting. Maybe I would consider installing that. But in this case, there's nothing here that really gets my attention. We're going to put LAMP server on this. Postgre might be something I might consider. That's a database product. But in this case, I don't need any of these extras, so I'm just going to hit done. and now it's going to go ahead and install. Now this installation takes a little while, so I'm going to put you on hold while it's doing what it's doing. Okay, now you had a menu option down at the bottom that said continue and reboot. So you could get out of this curtain command in target thing. But I just let that run to fruition. Now I'm going to click in here and tab down to where it says reboot now. Now there is one problem here. What it does is it fails at reboot here, so you have to restart the machine. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. I hit reboot now, and it's not going to be able to reboot because it says failed unmounting CD-ROM. So what you have to do is go up here to File, Close the machine. So you power it off, you go over to VirtualBox here, wherever it's at, and if you go in and look, you go into Settings and Storage. That CD-ROM icon is empty now, so it actually did remove it from the CD tray. This is all virtualized, so it's just an anthropomorphism, but you have to do that, and then you restart the machine, and it will start just fine for you. So that's an anomaly that I think you should watch out for. Now we'll let server boot up, and then I'll get with you right away when we're ready to do this next bit of work. Now here you can see the SSH keys showing up. These are going to be the keys that will be used by your SSH server. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit enter here a little bit, and I get my login. Now what I'm going to do is log in as me, and I'm going to type in my password. Now this is a regular command line interface CLI system. You can see that we've got the correct static IP address. One thing I want you to note here is that Ubuntu doesn't use ETH0 for the name for an Ethernet address. So you have like ETH0, ETH1, ETH2. Kali does use that, but Ubuntu does not. So what it does is it names the interface, and you can see there that the name is ENP0S3, Echo November Papa 0 Sierra 3. And you'll have to probably write that down, because if you're going to mess around with any kind of settings, you'll need to know what that interface is. Now there's a command you can type in, IP space A, and you hit enter, and it's going to tell you what the address is for this particular computer. Now there's something I want to show you, but let's try pinging some hosts just to see if we can make it happen. So I'm going to ping, say, 8.8.8.8. and hit enter, and I get a response. That's great. And I'll ping 8.8.4.4. Oops, I hit enter too quick. And that's great. And I'm going to try pinging the Cloudflare servers 1.1.1.1. And they respond, and I'll ping 1.0.0.1. And let's make sure that name resolution is working. I'm going to ping www.microsoft.com, for example. Let's see if we can get resolution on that. So that looks really good. There's no problem there. I'm going to clear the screen with a clear. Now I want to show you something that's pretty interesting. What they've done is they have taken the old way of mapping IP addresses. It was called resolve.conf, resolv.conf. Conf stands for configuration. They've not done away with that, but they've modified it to where everything that happens now happens through a thing called net plan. Let me show this to you. So we're going to change into etsy/netplan and hit enter and do an ls. And what happens is these net plans are configured in like an XML type of thing. It's not XML, but it's like that. It's a markup language. And this is called 00 tac installer tac config.yaml, and you can cat this. So if you say sudo cat, I don't even know if I need sudo. Let me try without sudo. Let me just try cat 00 tac installer tac config.yaml, and it shows you what it's got. So this is a really different layout, and you're going to have to probably read up on NetPlan, as this is new as of like Ubuntu Server 18-ish and above. And you can see here that it starts out with network : and and then Ethernets, plural, colon, and then addresses, colon, and then there's our static address. If we have more than one Ethernet port, we would have multiple addresses, and if we had bonded Ethernet ports, there would be another entry in there. Then we have name servers, colon, addresses, colon, and we show the addresses that we gave that I specified here. And then we don't have a search domain. And then we have routes, colon, to default via our gateway, our 172.16.1.1 gateway, and then version, colon, 2. Now, if you go out and you do some research on this, you can write your own net plan. I messed around a little bit with that, but and you can see that this is a network config written by Subiquity. I didn't do much research on that, so I don't know what the heck that is. I would have to research it more. But I do want you to know about NetPlan, as that is very, very interesting to me. I'm going to do a CD enter to go back home and clear the screen. How do you know you're home in Linux? Well, in Ubuntu, you see that you've got a tilde. So it's my username at my server name, colon, tilde, $. And the tilde means that I am at the B. Heldman home. The first thing that we want to do is make sure that we've got updates here. So we do a sudo apt. Now, it used to be apt install, and Ubuntu has gotten away from that. So we can go with just the native apt command, and we're going to go ahead and do an update on this and see if there's any updates that are out there for us, and hit enter. And I type in my password and hit enter, and it's getting all of the packages it needs from the Jammy in release area. Now what we can do is we can upgrade. So the way that you do an upgrade is you do a sudo. I'm going to show you a joint command that you can put together both of these things to happen at once. So you do a sudo apt update, then you put in 2 ampersands. Generally speaking, in the world of coding, ampersand means and a pipe, which is just above your enter key, it's an uppercase backslash, means or. Pipe is used extensively in Linux for tacking things onto commands. Now, double ampersand means sudo update and sudo apt upgrade. So it's going to do both of those things. I'm going to put a tac y on there at the end, because what happens is it gets to the end of, it goes and researches everything that it needs, and then it says, hey, it's going to take this much space. Is that okay with you? And you have to type in a yes or no. When you put the tac y on there, you're saying, okay, don't bother me with that. Just go ahead and do it. So I'm going to hit enter. This is going to take a minute. Okay, now here you might get into some trouble, because what it's doing, we're done doing the upgrade, and it's offering, it has to restart some services like SSH and some others, and it wants to know if that's okay. And so the only choice you have really is you could select the services, but I'm just going to tab down because it's already selected those that it needs to restart, and I'm going to hit enter for OK. And then we're done. So now we're all done. I'm going to clear the screen. All right, so since this is going to be a web server, what we want to do is we want to install what is called LAMP. LAMP stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. So, of course, we understand the Linux part. Apache is a very well-known, very highly respected web server product made by Apache Corporation. And then PHP is a programming language that's used for predominantly websites where somebody needs to log in. Maybe they want to purchase something. PHP is a baseline for that. And then MySQL is a database system. And there are other ways to implement this, but LAMP is well-known, well-respected. It's been around a long time. You can also get MAMP, which is Macintosh OS, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And then you can get WAMP, which is Windows, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. We'll start first by installing Apache 2. So it's a pretty easy command. We just do a sudo apt install Apache 2. I'm going to put a TAC Y on the end of that and hit enter and type in my password. And we'll get this going. It might take a minute for it to install. It's a fairly big product. Now let's bring up Kali and see if we can actually hit this machine here. So I'm going to bring up Kali. I'm going to go out to the web, and I'm going to look for 172.16.1.10 and see if Apache answers, and sure enough it does. And that's what we're really trying to accomplish here, is we just want to have a web server. And you see that it's telling you where all these things live at within the actual Apache server itself. Now, if we wanted to take this further, in other words, we wanted to create apps which would allow a user to be able to log in through a login page, and we wanted to use the PHP language, and we wanted to store all of that information in a database, so we would want a dynamic application. We would move even further and install the rest of the stuff onto our Ubuntu server. To do that, we need MySQL, so we're going to sudo apt install MySQL server, like so, and hit enter. And I could have put a TAC Y on there, and that would have done that for me. Now what we're going to do is install PHP, so I'm going to do a sudo apt install. And there are three things we're going to install here. PHP, library for Apache 2, mod, PHP, and then PHP for MySQL. And we hit enter. Oh, and I misspelled libapache here. Lib, Apache, I have an H in there. A-P-C-H-E. There we go. I'll put a TAC Y on the end of that. Okay, so that's all done. And like I said, I just wanted to show you how you install LAMP server. We have proven that Apache is working. It is responding. This is going to require a lot more reading on your part. I will, like I said before, put a link in this video series. I'll put a couple of links in here so you can go out and you can see how to complete the installation of MySQL, test and make sure it's working, complete the installation of PHP, make sure it's working. You can create virtual website folders for yourself so you could be hosting multiple websites off of this system. But that's what we've done. We have installed a web server here inside a virtual environment on a private subnet 172.16.1.0, and it's working and everything. We're able to get pages off of Kali, and so that's all. Now the last thing that I wanted to talk about, I want to mention a couple of things that have to do with the firewall. This movie is a little bit late because I ran into some real big problems messing around with this and trying to get things straight in my head. I wanted you to see these things. First of all, I'm going to grab a command prompt here. I'm going to do a Control-Shift++ to get a little bit bigger font here, and then I'm going to widen this out a little bit. And I like to ping hosts just to make sure that I can hit them successfully. And so I'm getting 8.8.8, and I'll ping Microsoft. Let me ping www. Let's try something else like IBM, just to make sure we can hit it. And that looks very good. Great. Okay, so I'm just going to do a Control-C to get out of that. Now let me show you a couple of things in the firewall that you need to be aware of. First of all, under Services, you have a new thing in pfSense Plus. This is new. It's called a DNS Resolver. In previous versions of pfSense, you used what was called a DNS Forwarder. The resolver is the default. It works fine. One of the interesting characteristics of the resolver is it's using the loopback address to do its work. Now, if I go into resolver, you can see that it's enabled and it's listening on port 53. We don't have SSL or TS configured. It's got a web configurator default here. And then all of the network interfaces are listening on port 53. And it has DNS security enabled, which is really cool. Notice here that you have this enable forwarding mode. I want to show that to you. If you went to System, General Setup, you could add DNS servers here. And I messed around quite a bit with this. Here's the thing. If you have other DNS servers, like if you're having a problem getting resolution, name resolution, you can't get out to a host, then what you might consider doing is adding static DNS server entries here. So it's under System, General Setup. Then you go into Services, DNS Resolver, and you can tell it to forward the information to those DNS entries. Ideally, you want to avoid that. You don't want to have to do that, but you can do that. Now, the old thing is called DNS Forwarder. It is not enabled, but if you got into all kinds of trouble and you're like, well, I just want to back up and go with the before, the older, you could go to System, General Setup, key in your DNS servers, and what you want to do is you want to grab your home's DNS server, and then you want to grab, like I do here, I do Google and I like Cloudflare as well. And let me show you real quickly how you look at your home DNS server. So what I do is I come in here and I type in ipconfig/all, and then I go scroll up to where I can see my Ethernet adapters. I have 3 of them in this computer. And you can see here that my DNS server is 10.0.0.1. So that's how you do it. On the Mac, it would be, I don't know if Mac supports IPA now, or it could be ifconfig, but that's where you get the DNS server information. So what you would do is you would key in the very first entry would be your DNS server, which would be your home router or firewall. Then you would key in the others, Google and Cloudflare. And then you go over to Services, Forwarder, Enable Forwarder, Query DNS Servers, and I would make sure that if I was going to do that, I would disable DNS Resolver. But out of box, this thing should work pretty well for you. So I'm not sure that I would mess around with that. Now, the last thing I want you to know about is now we have to have some firewall rules. I want to show those to you. So it's under Firewall Rules. And there are rules that are set up for every segment of your network. So the WAN has some rules. These are set up by default. We're not going to use any of those. The LAN has some rules. This is set up, it's called an anti-lockout rule, so that you cannot lock yourself out and you're unable to get to the firewall because you want to use Kali or whatever you're using to get to the firewall on the LAN network. So that is an anti-lockout rule. And I've added a couple here. I want to show these to you. So the rules are pretty interesting. So you can click a rule, and then you can edit the rule by clicking this little pin icon. And this is what it looks like. You've got an action. In this case, we're going to pass. You have another action called block. If you block something, what's going to happen is the firewall is just going to drop that packet, and it's not going to report back to the machine that's trying to contact you at all. It's just going to drop it. If you reject, it's going to report back to the machine that's trying to contact you and say, hey, I'm rejecting this. In our case, we're just going to choose pass for now. The interface is going to be LAN. The protocol is IPv4. Protocol is any. And here's the interesting thing. The source is from LAN net. So anything from LAN net, any destination, we're going to allow. And this is called an allow rule. Now there's another rule that I have enabled here, and it's for IPv6. And so I select the IPv6 protocol from LAN net, any. And so we've got 2 rules, and I put in a description here. This shows up in the rules right over here. Now you can pause these rules. So if you click this international no sign, you can disable the rule. You can also copy the rule. So if you create one here, you can copy it and just adjust the settings, which is what I did. You can delete a rule, but these rules are working. Also, you can add to the top or add to the bottom, and you can put a separator in here. Let me show you what the separator looks like. So this is pretty cool. So I'm going to say this is LAN firewall rules, like so. and I'm going to click Save. I'm going to drag this separator up so that I can tell the thing that has been added by pfSense is the anti-lockout rule, but the thing that I added are these two rules here. Now, the thing that you want to check too is under DMZ. Oops, stay on page. I made some changes, so I've got to save. And then I can change to DMZ. And you can see that I've done this same thing for DMZ. So let me edit. It's going to be a pass. I'm going to let anything out of the DMZ on IPv6 or IPv4, any DMZ net, any. So I'm going to let it go anywhere. This is not letting anyone come in. It's letting the DMZ go anywhere. Now you can see that when I created these two rules, I had IPv6 last. You can drag these around so you can reposition them so that it looks a little better. And those are the rules that are allowing you to get out. Well, that's all I've got for this video. Thank you for joining me, and I'll talk to you on the next one. Be good. Bye-bye.